Welcome, everybody, to From Production to Distribution, web series success stories, part of Totally Indie Day, presented by TELUS STORYHIVE. And it's really wonderful to see you all here, wonderful to be here, and to have the opportunity to chat with these very interesting and diverse creators, diverse in terms of the project genre, project format, and funding and production strategies. So I think this will be a really interesting conversation. We'll try and keep it really tight, move it along quickly because there's a lot to cover. We're planning to go from development through pre-pro to production. We're going to skip post very likely and go all the way through to distribution. So it's a lot to cover in a short time and still leave time for your questions. So just a little overview of what we're going to be doing. But before I really go any further at all, it's very important to acknowledge and to express my own feelings of honor and gratitude to the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations peoples, by dint of whose courtesy and generosity we are here today on this land, able to have this event. And I'm so honored to be here at this time to participate in the conversation that we need to have with each other as we reach for each other in the reconciliation process. I think there's no way to do that without reaching to know each other better. And specifically, it's our time and our turn to reach toward the First Nations peoples of these land, to know who they are, to let them tell us. So I'm very honored to be here, and I'm sure you all join with me in expressing gratitude. So let me introduce briefly our panel members. To my immediate left is Tyler Funk, a producer and director from Alberta, who recently has had great success with his series She's Not Funny, a web series not too surprisingly focused around stand-up comedy delivered by women, created and delivered by women. So thank you very much, Tyler, a great contribution to the landscape. And I think as I introduce each of you, we'll play a brief clip from your project before going on to the next person. So let's have a clip from She's Not Funny. True North. Great. So let's get right into some conversation. As I said earlier, I'll ask each of these wonderful panel members some questions, and then we'll leave some time for audience questions toward the end of the session. So let's start with development. And Tyler, I think I'm going to ask you first. You all have very unique models, actually, which is really, I mean, kudos to whoever it was who put this panel together, who may well be Megan and Lizzie from StoryHive, I don't know, but, or maybe Amber, whoever it was, wonderful job, wonderful variety of strategies of content, and that goes all the way from development strategies through to distribution platforms. So I'm excited for you to share your experience with everyone. First of all, can you tell us a little bit, Tyler, of how this idea came to you? What happened? I understand your sister is a stand-up comedian.
Yeah, for sure. So I run a company called North of Now, and we've done about 6 full web series in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. And we've been doing a lot of it, and it's always has to start, I think, with something that excites you. But also, where do you have access? Where are you going to get interesting people? Where are you going to elevate yourself from a filmmaker instead of it just being you and your friends? How do you make it something bigger? So my sister is one of those comics in the trailer, and she just really opened us up and really helped co-create it to the world and a lot of the challenges that they were having behind closed doors that we want to share in the series.
Thank you. Yeah, I really, I remember when we were talking to each other before this panel, and thanks for saying the name of your company, North of Now. I was really struck by how grounded you are in your approach to content creation, both in terms of just really looking around you, seeing who's next to you, seeing where you have access, figuring out how to make that interesting or seeing what strikes you as interesting, and then sorting out how to leverage that in a very real way. Even starting with setting up your company with people who you knew basically from kindergarten, but you know, as I remember you telling me, you all had very specific skills. So there was going to be space for everybody in the company. Can you speak a little bit about that?
For sure. So my company there's basically 3 of us in the core of it, and we all went to kindergarten together in Banff, Alberta, and we came out here to make films. And we've been doing that for 6 years now. And yeah, basically the idea was like finding people around you that can elevate you, that are smarter than you, that have different skills that you don't have. And so for me, development's really about picking up my phone, writing emails and writing to people that are doing cool stuff and trying to be a part of that and just following your curiosity.
Fantastic. So how did you first start to think about creating this project? Because the first thing one always thinks about is financing, right? So who did you go to first?
Yeah, so for this one, we basically, STORYHIVE had the call for the 100K web series project, which is amazing that they're funding, Alberta and BC stories. Like, I think they're doing such cool stuff. And then it was just a matter of like, what story do we want to pitch for this? Like, it's such an amazing opportunity. You got to put a pitch together, right? Like, why would you let that pass by? And so we said, yeah, let's go have some fun and then figure out what we want to do next.
Fabulous, thanks. And we'll come back later to talk more about the various online platforms that you've also had great success with. So thanks very much, Tyler. Kate.
Hi.
Hi. Lovely to have the opportunity to chat with you as well. So what about NarcoLeap? Can you give us a little bit of the development history of NarcoLeap?
Sure. I just want to reiterate exactly what you just said too, because it really does have to start with what you love and what your creative or curiosity, what you're curious about. And for me, I had just directed 2 short documentary films. Documentary is kind of my background. And I always wanted to direct a scripted project, and for lack of confidence or lack of opportunity, whatever, I then turned 40 and I said, screw this, I'm not wasting any more time, and just went for it. And so I was looking to do a short film, because that's what everyone does. You start with a short film. I was working with a writer. We were kind of going back and forth on different ideas. And at one of our meetings at the Metrotown Food Court, I said, you know what I'd really like to do? I'd really love to do a sci-fi web series. I love having a story you can kind of build out through various episodes. I love sci-fi. I've always loved it. I want a female lead, and I had known Chelsea, who is the star in it, and I said, I really want to work with Chelsea. And so a week later, he came back and he pitched me this idea. It was very rough, and it was about this young girl. Her name was Subject 46. She was trapped in a military facility with special powers. I'm like, okay, there's something here. Let's keep, so we kept kind of working it. And then Stranger Things came out, which was about a young girl called 11 who had special powers, and she was trapped in a military facility. So, but those moments you realize, okay, you're in the zeitgeist, okay, we're back to the drawing board, but we're on to something. And then at that time, I had been accepted to the Women in Directors Chair program. Mm-hmm. And so I carried on with the project and, started reworking the development package, and had the luxury of that program and having some support with story editors and all the rest. And then NarcoLeap is what it is now. Yeah.
And it's wildly successful.
Yeah. But it started with saying, I'm going to take this chance. I'm going to try something I haven't done before, and I'm going to do what I really am passionate about and what I love.
100%. Thank you. And 2 things really stand out for me in what you've just shared with us that I think people might want to hear a little more about. One of them is the importance of programs like Women in the Director's Chair, because women are coming from behind the 8 ball. We're, according to a study by Gina Davis, we're represented on screen 17% of the time. That means 63 is not women, right? So so you spoke to me, you mentioned it now, and when we spoke earlier, you talked about having a place where you can build that confidence to just feel, even though we don't necessarily see ourselves out there in these roles, although we do more and more, but that you could actually feel within yourself that ability to just kind of go for it without having to be an expert on absolutely everything before you try anything, right? Which is a trap that women often get stuck in. We kind of of need to get the experience and want to get the experience, but it's hard to take the leap unless you have the experience. And of course, no one's going to fund you unless you have it. So this is a really important piece of your trajectory, that you found a place to build that confidence, right?
Yeah, it's like having that community for sure, having support, like, you know, the programs like that, and also, you know, StoryHive as well, and you know, the NSI, and we had, you know, as we went through into production, I had mentors as well. I mean, it was absolutely, you know, I look back on it now and I think about, you know, the level of confidence I had in terms of directing before all of this, which was like way down here, which is, it's ridiculous because I'd already, you know, I'd done lots of directing in documentary, you know, world, and I'd done 2 short films, and like, you know, why the heck could I not do this? But you get that little itty bitty shitty committee, oops, sorry, in your head. You guys all have it. You all know what I'm talking about, and it tells you, you know, you're not good or this or that, and then it just builds up, and eventually you just get to a point you're like, this is stupid. Like, why am I, you know, taking away these opportunities and these chances for myself?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And, you know, making the leap from documentary to scripted drama in terms of directing, which was a really good way for you to leverage your experience into this platform that you really wanted to inhabit and that you have done so well. Also, you talked about Chelsea, and this, I think, was part of your development strategy. Can you talk about Chelsea? Give us her last name. She was on the 100 on the CW network, so she has a large following. She was someone you already had a connection with, and so that was an obvious person to go to in terms of leveraging potential distribution.
Yeah, I had actually, I had hired Chelsea probably about 11 or 12 years ago as a host for a travel show I was producing. And I just, you know, I loved her energy and I loved, you know, what she was doing. And then, of course, she got on the 100 as a reoccurring character. And yeah, I mean, the fans of the CW and that show, they're pretty amazing. They, you know, we were getting fan art. And but we hadn't even gone into production, and people like making posters and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, it's, you know, it was definitely part of the strategy.
Yeah,
sure.
Thank you, and we'll come back to that. And one of the things that I didn't mention is that it is a StoryHive funded project, correct?
Yeah.
And you had some other, you had IPF funding, you had StoryHive funding, you had initially talked to CBC, but then
yeah. So I had the Independent Production Fund, TELUS StoryHive, yay, and Creative BC as well, and then tax credits topped it up.
Great. Did you have Creative BC in for development with StoryHive, or is that how Creative BC came in?
Part of a top-up.
Part of a, okay, a top-up funding, okay. And then tax credits, provincial and federal.
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much for that. Ryan, patiently on the other side of the stage. Happy to get to you. So as I mentioned earlier, you're a producer and director, and you had some early success with a fabulous web series called Welcome to Fairfax, which was about a particular street and a particular part of a street, North Fairfax Avenue in north central LA, right? That is.
Yeah, well, it wasn't. It was for a network. It was sort of Participant Media had a network, so it's actually like traditional TV.
Right.
I think they were 22-minute, like, you know, 22 minutes with ads.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting experience, just kind of having a like a passion project, going from something I was just, you know, running around with a camera with, and then pitching it around to be, you know, picked up and made into a television series. I don't know, and it was a learning experience because it was just, you know, it was my first time kind of, you know, entering in this world and in bigger productions and bigger budgets. So I definitely learned a lot about how not to make a series with that process.
Yes.
Which is invaluable information.
Yeah.
To kind of see something maybe
Yeah.
lose its integrity along the way. I'm just being honest.
No,
about
for
it,
sure.
yeah.
Honesty is, yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. And one of the things that, again, as with everyone else, that strikes me about you is the grounded nature of your choices in terms of what you choose to make films or documentaries about. So you did Welcome to Fairfax. You had connections in that community. And then, you are totally passionate about sports. You went to Vice as they were just beginning to capitalize on the sort of the proliferation, if you will, of web content, and did short form content for them again with sports. So talk to me a little bit about how True North came onto your radar. Again, a sports piece.
Well,
what was
I
your
was
strategy?
originally I was always going to make something about basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love basketball and I like documentary film. So, okay, let's try to do this, right? And so I'd rather crash and burn doing something I love than settling. So I said, okay. So it actually started when I was studying as a film student. I was in New York and I was kind of running around New York trying to do something on basketball. And that's when I was kind of introduced into this cottage industry of youth basketball. So I started just filming in New York. And then, at that time, the Fairfax series took off. So I shelved this idea, which was really about youth basketball in New York, kind of like, meshing hoop dreams with the YouTube world together. And what does that look like? So after I did the Fairfax series, I tried to pitch, just knowing what I knew about how the industry works and pitching and packages and putting, the whole project together. I pitched it around in the States and it never really got any traction. And then, being Canadian and being back in Canada, I said, okay, I'm in Canada now. How can I use the resources available to me in this country and in the city I'm in, where I was born in Vancouver? How could I make this work? Because I really wanted to make the project. So I just actually cold called Shirley at the NFB and I said, hey, I want to make this project, and told her a little bit about myself. And, at that time, a lot of projects, I think, comes down to timing, because at that time, basketball in Canada was really starting to take off. Like, it's always been something in this country, but at that point, you had more kids from Canada, specifically Toronto, making waves in the States. So it's kind of good timing when I brought it to the NFB.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And one of the things that's interesting about that is that correct me if I'm wrong, but you made reference to Shirley Vercruci at the National Film Board Pacific and Yukon studio, who I believe is with us here today. Yay, NFB. I'm interested to hear about that development process, because I am not aware, but I'm sure one or both of you will correct me if I'm wrong, that the NFB has ever done a series of this kind before, a sports short-form documentary web series.
I believe it was the NFB's first
Yeah.
web series.
Yeah.
They actually have a long history of really amazing sports docs.
For sure, absolutely.
But it was the first web series. So just kind of talking, once we decided, okay, let's start developing this project. And it was just kind of, based on the basketball world and how a lot of people who are into basketball are consuming content, the audience for it is going to watch it online. So just kind of naturally, as we were, we're throwing things at the wall. Is this a feature? Is it, 2 parts? Is it 4 parts? But it just kind of made sense to make it more of a short to mid-form doc series, just kind of based on the climate, I think, of viewing habits and what we were making.
Yeah, and one of the things that I love about the National Film Board, one of the many things, is that they are always open to messing around with genre, right? They're always open to innovative ways to deliver content, innovative ways to tell stories, and kind of they're not genre bound. So I'm guessing, but I'm interested in your thoughts, that was not a super heavy lift, even though they'd never done something like this before, to convince Shirley, I'm going to talk about you in the third person, to come on board for this series. Or
well,
what are your thoughts?
I don't know. It's probably more of a Shirley question, but I think what was.
Well, I guess my question is: do you feel like you really had to pitch for them to come on board for a series? Was that part of the conversation with them?
Well, I think what was interesting was, kind of being programmed, coming off of a series that's sold in the States and then pitching and developing content to sell to traditional television networks at the time in the States, I really had to rethink how I was presenting this project to the film board, because the film board goes about projects in a different way than, say, Spike TV.
Sure.
Right? So I really had to, justify why this story, why now? They kind of make you go
why
through
you,
this.
why this story, why now?
Yeah, and again, going back to the timing that basketball in Canada was having this moment and really reshaping kind of Canadian identity internally, domestically, and abroad, where we're having so much success with the sport. Now kids, let's say in New York or in Philadelphia, might look at Canada and say, hey, basketball and Drake and The Weeknd and that idea of kind of ice hockey and Wayne Gretzky is there's other images kind of in basketball as a part of that identity shift and culture shift. So the timing was really good to have a company or entity like the Film Board come on, who's interested in telling these kinds of stories about Canada from different points of view.
Perfect. So is it fair to say that NFB then really helped you elevate the project because they were really interested in positioning it within a larger conversation about the nature of Canadian identity, the nature of sport, and the shifting kind of landscape of inclusion?
Network executives might be going, well, who's a famous executive producer we can get on this project? Or, we need more stakes and more drama, where the Film Board was, kind of empowering me to be a filmmaker and really champion the project. And that was super refreshing and kind of energized me to really put the foot on the pedal. So I think, when it comes to pitching and things, sometimes it just is finding that one person. Like I found Shirley, who was excited about the project and kind of motivated me and gave me that fuel to keep going and really do this.
Fabulous. Thank you.
I would probably have some, just to guess though, I probably Shirley liked you and your passion for the idea too, right? I don't know, Shirley, but
No,
but, because you are part of the package. For these development programs,
Well,
you're selling yourself as a filmmaker.
Absolutely, Kate, and I think that's a really good point to bring forward. I think this is true for all of you, is that you and your team are always part of the package. That it's great to have a wonderful idea, but the people on the other side who are about to give you a chunk of money need to have some sense of your ability to deliver. Right? And so you're absolutely right. And your commitment and your passion for the project. I mean, I always say, and this reminds me actually, with apologies, I forgot to introduce myself. So I will do that in a moment. But I always say, in making a film or a series is so much blood, sweat, and tears, truly. Why would you ever do that unless you were doing it about something that you really cared about? I mean, really, honestly, it's the only thing that gets one from A to B, right? Or from A to Z, Z. It rhymed. I have an American wife, so I reserve the right to say Z occasionally. So I am Christina Willings. Nice to meet you all. Aw, thank you. I am a producer, also a writer and director and filmmaker, and I am working with TELUS on the TELUS Originals side of content creation within TELUS as a producer for the TELUS Original stream of content, and I dip over into the STORYHIVE side, but my primary responsibility is with the TELUS Original stream of content. So, good afternoon. All right, continuing with our conversation. Tyler, I might as well come back to you. Lots of interesting things about your project. Just finding my place here. You know how you make notes and then things have already been covered, and so then you're like, okay, well, let's not bring that up again. Can you talk a little bit about your background? You have, as I said earlier, everyone has just a really unique positioning within the industry, and I love that. Your company, North of Now, has primarily been engaged in commercial, or you began in commercial production. Is that fair to say? And you also began in a very live online environment with live online pitching and 24-hour film contests and those kinds of things. I would like you to talk about that because I think that really speaks to how filmmaking becomes accessible and how discoverability happens and how one can position oneself to get money within an online environment and then leverage that to actually make the projects that you're very passionate about. I mean, sometimes you do have to build a groundswell first. We all need to pay the bills, right? We need to have some kind of a bread and butter short cycle project wheel going sometimes, and I think you can speak to that well.
Yeah, so I went to film school at UBC and Langara. I kind of did both at the same time, and did several short films, which had fairly successful, festival runs around North America and around the world. But they're expensive to make, and they don't really get you anywhere unless you're going straight into your feature. Like, you're not going to necessarily make a living off of your student short films or the short films you've shot. So after film school, we started doing a lot of online competitions. So places such as Tongle or MoFilm or Zupa or PopTent, which basically give commercial briefs, and any filmmakers from around the world can pitch on them and say, this is your take. So it's really the kind of the crowdsource wave that just like exploded around that time, and it's still really going on. And it's kind of this thing that then you can pitch from anywhere, and there's always a deadline, which I think as a filmmaker, like you're a filmmaker if you're making films, if you're finding something to do. And so the opportunity that these things have is it gets you off your butt, you develop your pitch skills, you keep working on your pitch skills, you make money, you're doing commercials. We've done broadcast commercials for Coca-Cola, Budweiser, Ford, P&G, Lego, a ton of brands. And like getting to work with them, you learn so much. And it's a great way to make money while you're developing your personal projects and these other web series that are like amazing projects, but they take a lot of time. And it takes a lot of time even just waiting for the decisions to be made. And so it's finding that balance so you can always be directing. And that was kind of my goal, and that's what I do with my company.
Fabulous. Thanks very much. Yeah, it's. I remember chatting with you, and you were talking about doing so much work in a crowdsourcing environment, and you touched on how people can be afraid of that. They can be very scared that other people are going to horn in on their IP, and they're going to take your ideas and make a lot of money, and all of that sort of thing. And I loved your response to that. I wonder if you'd share it with the audience now.
Yeah, basically I was just saying, like, I think ideas are relatively cheap and easy to come by. Like, I think if you want some good ideas, just like have a coffee, go for a walk, talk with some people that inspire you, watch some stuff that inspires you. You get the ideas easily. But then you got to take action on them. And that's where I think pitch competitions, 24-hour film races, just things to get the ideas out there and start them growing is what's really important.
Yeah, you see, you're so far from feeling fear about having your ideas out there that you didn't even hear that in my question, and I love that. Because, right, so many of us are afraid that if we expose our ideas, people are going to take them, But you actually talked about how if you don't leverage your idea before someone else does, then you're not working hard enough, or you're.
Yeah, totally. Like, I'll talk to anyone that wants to hear about what I'm working on and what I'm hoping to develop as much as I can. And
how having more creative content out there elevates everybody, right? Mm-hmm. It sparks and elevates all of us. I mean, we used to talk about being in a POMO world. We don't talk about that so much anymore, but the fact is still there that,
they're exciting.
We're swimming in a creative soup together, right?
Yeah,
so.
I think it's always like they're exciting conversations to have, and like the more everyone gets together and shares where your funding sources are coming from and what your ideas for that one is, and you can bounce off each other, it just makes everybody stronger and is a really good use of your time.
Thanks. I saw you lift your mic, Kate. Did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Oh, no, I'm just repositioning.
Okay, great. Well, then I'll ask you something else. Your series has really high production values.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm not going to ask you to disclose what the budget was, but I know that we all have had experiences of doing things on a shoestring, and this was your first scripted series as a director. And so I can imagine that it wasn't something that had millions of dollars behind it, right? So can you talk about that, about making something possible? I know it's a big question. I know, and I also know that you applied for the Independent Production Fund, and that you had STORYHIVE funding. Mm-hmm. And I know full well that preparation for those things is not small. It's a lot of work.
Very time consuming. And the IPF has 2 phases.
Yeah.
If you don't make it through the first phase, you don't get invited to ask, for the second phase of applications. You do have to make a pitch video as well, and it has to be, fairly decent enough to gather some views online. And so, you're putting money out for that. Before you even get money, you're spending money, right? So back to the production quality. Thank you for that.
Pleasure.
It was a very measured decisions and step-by-step decisions that I made in terms of key creatives and trying to bring people on that. Ryan McMaster was our director of photography. He's done Fringe and Battlestar Galactica and iRobot. Like, does all the sci-fi shows in Vancouver. And I was very lucky to be introduced to him. And I very sheepishly called him up one day. I'm like, "Hi, I'm Kate Green, and will you come and do my web series?"
Just a moment.
And so
Good for you, Kate. Really good for you. That's so important. That moment
calling.
right there is
Yeah.
worth gold.
Yeah,
Right?
so-
you see someone you want, don't assume that they don't give a whatever about you, right? I probably shouldn't say
Yeah.
what I would normally say, but
Yeah.
don't assume that. Just pick up the phone. Send
Yeah.
them an email.
So and he's like, "Yeah, okay, sure. Like, I think I got some time off." And I'm like, "Really?" And every day he showed up, I was like, "Oh, thank God you came back." It's just, blown away. And he was just like the nicest man, and just like such an incredible person to really collaborate with. And and he knew where I was at in all of this, and he just listened and didn't try to railroad any, there's always that fear sometimes. But he was just such a wonderful man to work with, and a huge part of the production value. And we had some incredible people in our art department and production design. And it's just, step by step measured. And don't assume people will say no. Reach for the stars. Ask people that, you would never think in a million years they'd want to work on your project for next to nothing. So you never know.
And thank you for that. Absolutely. And always remember that people believe in you, right? To your earlier comment. So it's about being real, being grounded, having, a lot of clarity about what the skill is that you bring to this project, and engaging in honest conversations about where you've been, what you've done, and where you want to go. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it was always, I just always want to be a woman of my word. And everybody that worked on NarcoLeap, they have a job for season 2. And if it goes to a TV series or whatever the future holds for NarcoLeap, they're part of the family. They were there at the beginning, and I'll take them right to the end.
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad you talk about that, because that's a really time-worn strategy. Come in for the small version, and I'll hire you for the big version. Let's grow this together, and let's all benefit together, right? And that's so important. Thank you. So important, too, when we're talking about inclusivity and we're talking about telling each other's stories, to remember to, if we're taking, well, that's a whole other conversation. Never mind. I'm not even going to go there. Great.
How you doing, Ryan?
So, Ryan, we'll open it up for questions soon, too. Hey, Ryan. Nice toque. I like your toque. One of the really interesting things about your project is that the National Film Board actually was able to make a deal with Red Bull and bring Red Bull on board for your series. I wonder if you could speak to that, and also speak to the importance of the specific roles that each entity had on your production, because I think that that's a lot of, to our earlier conversation with Tyler about the specific roles within his company and clear job description. When you bring people in with specific expertise, you're not stumbling all over each other. You can actually make a co-production deal that works and move forward, relatively happily. So can you tell us about that?
Yes, I will. I just want to back up a little bit, because the development process also took a while. It takes a while with the film board, which is good, right? In some places it's really quick, some places fast, but I feel also
Publicly funded due diligence, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But also at the time, let's say when I made the television series, the traditional TV docu-reality series, I feel the industry was also in a place where it was still very pitch to production company, or work with a production company, take it to a network, it gets sold, it goes on TV. Whereas, just thinking about web series and distribution, I feel the industry also kind of shifted to to open up to more short form content. So it was really interesting also in the development process where you see more and more outlets getting in the short form game, which also kind of influenced, I think, the format as well. It wasn't as obscure, let's say, coming out in 2016, 17 as it were in 2014 or 2015. There was kind of a quick shift where a lot of people were doing short form content. So kind of going off of that, Shirley actually was able to connect with Red Bull, and they came in they licensed the project for the American market. But essentially how it kind of worked was the project and really the filmmaking aspect of the project was myself and the National Film Board working on that. And that was really awesome because they're a very filmmaker first entity, and empowering me to tell the story that I wanted to tell, and the integrity of the project was from development to release. It was how I envisioned. Nothing was really compromised. I got to tell the stories, or we as a kind of collective making the project, we got to tell the stories we wanted to tell, and then it worked out really beautifully because Red Bull is really great at amplifying projects, and they really know how to get projects out there, and they really understand new media, and they understand how to connect with their audience. So it was a really beautiful marriage between an institution that cares about integrity in documentary films and the craft, and then another entity that really knows how to spread word about a project and throw an amazing party, and that's their bread and butter. So it was just great that they complemented each other and they didn't complicate anything, which is key because there was no, Shirley might have other war stories, but it seemed pretty fluid and smooth, more or less.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ryan. And speaking of distribution, maybe we can briefly get a comment from each of you, and I have some specific things, and then we'll open it up to the audience. I believe we have some roving mics out there that will go into deployment. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So, Kate, you recently made a sale. Congratulations to CBC Digital for NarcoLeap. Yeah, you're so welcome. I know you spoke to Zach Feldman early in the process, or he inspired you early in the process. You heard him speak, and he was part of the sort of distribution vision for this project from early on. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was. I'd been talking to CBC probably for over a year, so it was Banff 2 years ago, I think now, and I got the idea that I might be able to have them come in later instead of it wasn't funded at that point, I don't believe. But anyways, so I made a sale to them. You can find NarcoLeap on TELUS Optic TV on VOD, and then also NarcoLeap.com. And I specifically made a choice in terms of YouTube and having it kind of out there on that platform. I had to make a choice as to, do I want to try and be making sales, or do I want to be building an audience? And so I went for YouTube because for me right now, it's about building an audience. So you're all more than welcome to take your phones out right now and follow us on YouTube. Or Twitter.
Can you speak to that a little bit, Kate, in terms of your end game for the choice to build an audience?
Yeah, so, Chelsea Reist, she does these fan conventions, and I could always tell where she was in the world because all of a sudden we'd get like a whole bunch of hits from Italy or a few German fans, or I could tell where she was talking about it. So, and so I knew that, and those fans are very vocal online too. And if she's doing something that they can't have access to because they're geo-blocked, there would be pushback. There would,
Right.
They'd be like, okay, see ya, fine. But because it has been available on YouTube, they've been very supportive and they've pushed it. And there's been times where, I've needed to get the word out about something, and they're like, okay, we're on it. The Reist army,
Yeah, it's great.
Reist mode is what they call themselves.
Yeah. So you were able to make a non-exclusive deal with CBC that allows your project still to exist on other platforms online, correct? And you were also, shout out has to be done really, even though I'm TELUS, but to StoryHive here because, or at least just an acknowledgement that that is one of the perfect outcomes for us. There are many kinds of perfect outcomes, but one of them is that somebody has exactly the kind of experience you've managed to have. You get funding to develop a proof of concept for a web series, and then you leverage that into a career accelerating move, which is your digital sale to CBC, you're building an online audience, which also hopefully will lead you to other opportunities as a director of scripted drama, right?
Absolutely,
I mean,
yeah.
which is fantastic. So congratulations to you.
I'm very happy that, you know, with TELUS, StoryHive, and CBC, we're able to, you know, make it work and yeah, I mean, it was a simultaneous release for both of those. Yeah.
And for clarity, CBC was not in before, but
Yeah.
CBC and TELUS StoryHive were able to negotiate a deal for co-branding once they acquired the series after the fact. Yeah, which was a first for us actually too. So that's great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of going back and forth, and I thought, God, surely I'm not the first person to have done this. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
well,
no.
you know, it's a
Go
growing
big or go
program all
home.
the time. There are lots of firsts to be had along the way. Thank you. So Tyler, what are your plans for She's Not Funny? Where are you planning to leverage it? What are your current platforms for it? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so for pretty much every web series we do, we try and launch exclusively with one digital platform and get the platform actually involved. So we released the first narrative series ever on Vine and worked directly with them. We released the first narrative series on Toonstar and worked directly with them.
And Vine was the first, sorry to interrupt you, but the first platform to sort of go into the 6-second short.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, it was just 6-second
right?
shorts.
Yeah.
And yeah, so for She's Not Funny, we're launching exclusively with Seed and Spark, and it'll be part of their big push of Canadian content.
And are you one of their first distribution projects with Seed and Spark?
We're going to be one of their first exclusive projects.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah, 'cause
yay, Tyler. And yay, Seed and Spark.
Yeah, we're really
fans.
excited about it. We're actually doing a little premiere and stuff at the ITV Fest in Vermont and working with them.
So as I understand it, even though it's really fantastic that Seed and Spark are doing this, and it's a great distribution platform, again, it's a subscription. Your payback, monetary payback, comes from they're leveraging their subscription model specifically with your project, or how does that work?
Yeah, so you get a
Because still are-
percentage of their views. Like they keep track of all their view count and all their subscribers. Basically, imagine like if everyone on Netflix, whatever you watched, some of that money went directly to the creators. So that's their model that they're running. And then we're also releasing the show on TELUS Optic so that everyone in Canada can see it.
Great, and Seed and Spark is fine with that.
Yeah.
Again, they're non-exclusive.
They were super cool with making that work.
Which is fantastic. It's interesting. One of the interesting things to come out of our conversations for me is that the realization that as much as we all want to look for ways to monetize web series, it's still very much, as you all know, in the process of being developed, right? Because in our conversation, Tyler, we talked about how vloggers and people who are putting out daily content every day are much more attractive to people who want to stick their advertising on your following, right? Because you're churning out content at such a rate that it becomes a really high volume. So it's tricky to find that. Do you have any comments
Yeah,
on
like
that?
in our experience, the model that I think we're all using of creating 10-part or 12-part web series, like you're never going to see revenue on ad view that's going to make it work. If you want to be making a living on YouTube, like get vlogging. Like that's the way to do it. That's all the people that are making money. And it's like if that's your personality and you want to be on camera, that's a great way to make it work. But producing these kind of like higher production level projects, you can't sustain that to do 3 or 5 episodes a week all year round. There's a few YouTubers that have their massive intern army that I know of, but I think there's some major flaws with that, and I think there's only so long that those places are going to last.
Thank you very much. So now we have just a few minutes. Sorry not to have stopped earlier, but I hope that you were enjoying this conversation. There's so many things, wonderful things to ask you about. For people to flag down one of the mics, there's one on each side with the people in the orange shirts. If there are any questions from the audience, now's your time. Great, quite a few.
Okay,
Let's get that going.
Speed round.
Thanks. Question for Kate. Visual effects, they're expensive, they're complicated, and you've managed to get them into your first narrative project. And I'm just wondering if you can speak to whether that was a daunting thing to do, whether you feel like it was the right thing to do, or are you looking back and thinking, oh God, I never want to do that again? Speaking from the perspective of someone who's working on a short sci-fi film, and I've always had this can-do attitude that, yes, if I want to do it, then I should just do it. But here I am in post-production, stuck with little to no money, and there's that visual effects sequence that's just not getting finished, and the whole thing's been stalled. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to that.
For sure. Well, I think it's true with any job, not just visual effects, but any position, any crew position. What we tried to do was find people that were knowledgeable in the area in visual effects, but perhaps hadn't had that opportunity to kind of step up to the next credit. So I was just very lucky. The same gentleman that introduced me to Ryan also introduced me to one of his visual effects producers, or she was. Actually, I can't remember what she does in the day, but she wanted to get the visual effects producer credit, and then we also found an artist that wanted to kind of add to his reel as well. So it's about networking and finding those people, the people that you're working with on set. If they're a third AD and they want to be a first AD, they're capable of doing it. It's not that but they just don't have the opportunity. So it was a lot of building opportunity for people to kind of step up, and sometimes it means a little bit more management that you have to be communicating constantly and a lot more, but people are really excited when they get to own it, they're like, yeah, we're gonna do the best job ever, and they do, so yeah.
So true. People are so happy to be given a leg up to the next level, to be a key in a department, right?
What do you all feel that web series as a format offers that maybe other film and media formats like short films or even a feature offers? Like, what's special about web series specifically?
Well, I just think that finally short to mid-form content is not a little brother of long-form content. I think for so long, features and going to see a movie in a theater and there was this kind of sexiness, I think, to that traditional view of movies, right? It has to be 2 hours and it has to be seen in a theater. And I just think now that audiences and outlets are changing, and I mean, if you look at, for example, Netflix, I mean, House of Cards, is that a web series? It's just a high budget web series. So I just think that now the idea of I think content is just kind of looked at more equally now. So whether it's something that's 2 hours or 15 minutes, I think that if it's good, it's good, and it's going to get eyeballs. So I think, and I also think you have to look at the viewing patterns of your audience, where people actually watch things that are 10 to 15 minutes. They could sit through that, whereas a lot of people aren't going to watch, an hour and 20-minute documentary. So maybe it's just more consumable. I don't know, but I just think in general, content is seen on more of an equal playing field.
Great.
Yeah, one thing I just want to jump in. I think it's not so much about what makes web series great. I think about what makes that platform great. And then if I'm going to tell a story in that platform, I'm going to use those tools. Because each platform is so different. Like the lengths that work, Funny or Die, like the places and the audiences you're going to connect with. So I think it's great to think about what I love about this platform, what do I spend my time doing on this platform, and that inspires me to create a show for that.
And who's going to give you money to make it? If someone said, hey, make True North a 2-hour feature, I'd be like, yeah. Right? But hey, we want to do a web series? Sure, that's cool too, because people are going to watch it and gravitate towards it as well.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Sorry not to have left longer. Oh boy, I'm not sure. Okay, this person had his hand up first, I believe.
Hi there. Tyler Funk, fantastic name, by the way. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Questions for Ryan. Ryan,
Are we to assume your name is Tyler? Is that
no, just Funk. It's fantastic.
Oh,
name.
Fung.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Ryan, you approached Vice and Spike, or did they come to you after you did some content?
Oh, well, I never worked for Spike. I said I would have pitched content to them. But Vice...
But you'd ended up producing content for them for about a year, right? So you were around for a while.
Not Spike. I just made a reference to Spike earlier in the
Vice.
conversation. But in terms of Vice, I worked at Vice Canada on and off for over a year. And again, I was just able to get my foot in the door there through some mutual friends and started actually doing really short content, 2 to 5 minutes, and then kind of started doing things that were 10 to 15 for the verticals. So in terms of getting in the door there was just working. A lot of it's working with people and doing good work beside them, and they kind of vouch and advocate for you, or people look at your past work and they like it, and it just kind of is. I know that sounds very simple, but I think if you have put your head down and work, or sometimes even working for free. I know a lot of people don't like to do it, but if that gives you access to somebody that could open doors for you, and you put in a bit of time with them, and it could pay off. So I think that sometimes you don't have to look at the monetary value of something. The value could be in the connection, or having a mentor, or their next project, they're going to call you and put some money in your pocket. So I think that's kind of how some doors have opened for me in the past.
That's great. Thank you, Ryan. Could we squeeze in one more, Zach? Just one. Thank you very much. Because there was a woman in the middle who had her hand up last time that we didn't get to. Does she still want to ask her question?
Hello, I guess this is to all three of you. From all your experiences pitching, how would you know when a pitch is ready? And from your experiences so far in your career, what are the key lessons you've learned along the way?
For pitching.
I'll jump in quick. I would just say, like, whenever the deadline is, I just work as hard as you can until then, and then you got to hand it off and just let it go.
Awesome answer. If it's scripted, it's a different kind of thing.
Yeah, well, for pitching, I mean, because like I said, I have a background in factual and documentary TV, so I've pitched a lot of shows in that arena. Don't pitch something that the network already did about 5 or 6 years ago. That's a good tip. Do your research, do your homework.
And don't pitch something that is nothing like anything you've ever seen on their platform before.
Yeah, like don't pitch a reality competition show to the NFB. Like, I mean, well, I don't know. Maybe that's a great. Surely, there we go.
Always
you get lots
open
of
to
reality
innovation.
competition shows. So yeah, do your homework, do your research, and know what it's about. NarcoLeap is about a young woman who leaps into other people when she falls asleep. That's the top line. But what is it really about? It's really about, a young woman finding her place in the world, building her confidence, navigating life and relationships as a 20-something-year-old. So know what your show is really about.
I'll just say one thing very quickly. If you have $0 and you're trying to put something together, okay, you could do Skype interviews. You could look on YouTube, rip videos.
Yeah.
If there's pre-existing content of that subject or that world that you want to use, you could write newspaper articles. It's recording conversations, still photos. So I think, if all you have is sweat equity, look at now, because it's the digital world, look at all of the information you could get out there to collect to put a really nice pitch together. And then, find that one person. If you want to pitch this network over here, well, find someone that who might know someone who might know someone who might know someone. So I think it just comes down to using what's available to you that's free, and putting your head down and kind of hustling on it.
Very important
Practice.
point. Thank you, Ryan. Sorry.
Practice your pitch.
Yeah.
Like you said, talk to everyone, because all of a sudden they'll start asking questions and like, this doesn't make sense. And then you realize, oh, I actually haven't figured this part out yet, So practice.
Absolutely. Know your stuff and don't discount any of the resources that are available to you, right? I think that's what we've heard here. Thank you very much, all three of you. I think this has been a wonderful conversation.